My name is Tamid. I work for the Center for Public Impact, and I'm a coach of the Opportunity Project for Cities program, and I'll be moderating the discussion today. Before we begin, I'd love to share a little bit about our project and what we do as a primer for our discussion today. So if you can move on to the next slide. So, who are the Center for Public Impact? Essentially, what we do is reimagine government. We work in partnership with governments, public servants, and change makers to challenge the status quo, shift mindsets, and bridge the gap between people and those in power. Our aim is to support local governments in fostering values of embracing complexity, building key relationships with residents and beyond, and also instill a practice of learning constantly. Next slide, please. So the Opportunity Projects for Cities, or TOPC, as we'll refer to it throughout this conversation, is a 20-week program where we work with local governments to address local challenges by designing digital tools. Our aim is to develop capacity in the following three areas. So we collaborate with residents to address local challenges. It's a core part of our curriculum, and we ensure that that's a core part of our work throughout the program, and that's something that the governments learn. And we build cross-sector partnerships, so the governments work very closely with community partners as well as tech partners throughout the program. And we also build capacity for digital innovation. Next slide, please. So over the last 4 years, we've worked with 7 different municipalities across the USA. As you can see, you can get a snapshot of all the different cities and counties that we've worked with, some of whom we've worked for consistently over the years. Next slide, please. A fundamental part of our program, as I mentioned earlier, is partnerships, not only in the delivery of our program, but how we set it up. So Center for Public Impact co-delivers the program with the Beck Center for Social Impact and Innovation, who's our technical experts. And the funding is provided by Knight Foundation, and Google.org provides pro bono tech support to our cities and counties to develop the products that we design. And without them, we wouldn't be able to function very well at all. Next slide, please. Just a quick clarification before we begin. So when we talk about sustainability today, we're not talking about sustainability in terms of environment or the climate, which is kind of the mainstream perception of what we perceive sustainability to be. But the definition that we're using is maintaining a product or process to an excellent level by encompassing various different tools and procedures. And that's the definition I'd like for you to hold as we move into the conversation today. So now onto our main event. So as mentioned, our topic of discussion today will be all about sustainability. How do we sustain our products, processes, and policies over time? And how do we make that a regular practice in our work? We have a wonderful set of panelists today who'll be joining us to be in conversation with us. And they are expert public servants who've cumulatively worked many years in local government and have worked very hard on today's issue, and we'll be talking more about that. We'll be spending the next 30 minutes of today in panel discussion, but then after that, we'll provide you with 15 minutes for a question and answer session. So as you're watching today, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A section of the webinar. And then we'll spend time at the last 15 minutes of today's call just going through those questions. One thing to note is the panel is recorded. The discussion today will be recorded, and it will be shared amongst all registrants as well as publicly on CPI's social media. We know as it's the holiday season, there might be a lot of people who might have wanted to attend but won't be able to because they're away or out of office. So we want to ensure that they have access to our recordings. Time to get started with our conversation. If we can highlight our panelists today. Amazing. Wonderful. Thank you all for joining us today. It's amazing to see your faces. And yeah, so we can get right to the introductions. So the first question is an introductory question. I'd love for you guys to introduce yourself and share a project where sustainability has been at the core of your work. And maybe we can start with Jennifer.
Good afternoon or good evening. It's actually still morning here in Honolulu, but good day to all of you. I'm Jennifer Wu. I work for the City and County of Honolulu, the Department of Human Resources, and I am a division chief supervising about 30 staff who work in recruitment, examinations, benefits, and human resources compliance matters. And I also have my boss and my colleague from the same department here with me today, who will be introducing himself next.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon or good evening to all of you. Thank you all for being here. As Jennifer mentioned, it's still morning here in Hawaii. It was nice and sunny. It's now a little overcast, but it's still beautiful out here. So I'm looking out my window at the Pacific Ocean waves lapping on our shores. But that's just a plug for our, our tourist dollars. But thank you, everyone, Tommy and CPI. My name is Bugs Baguio. I'm the Assistant Director of Human Resources for the City and County of Honolulu. We're basically the entire island of Oahu. We're the largest metropolitan area in the entire state. We're comprised of about a million residents on the island, and we have about 12 to 13,000 employees employed by the city and county in various positions. So we're happy to be here, and we're happy to talk about sustainability.
All right, I'll jump in here at the end. Hi, everybody. Jorge Valens. I'm the Innovation Manager for Miami-Dade County's Information Technology Department, part of our awesome innovation division. I like this chat because I feel it's like a beach competition between our friends in Honolulu and Miami. So this is a good beach showdown. It's a good dynamic. So our team, just in a nutshell, our team and the side of our team that I work on focuses on research and development, emerging technologies, and working with our partners and our departments and our internal employees to make change easy. Right, change is hard and it's scary, but change happens, and our innovation team is very centered on organizing and helping that change happen. And we've had the immense privilege to work with the Center for Public Impact and Beck Center and Knight Foundation now for 3 years. This is our third time on the Opportunity Project for Cities process. So we're excited to chat with you all.
Brilliant. Thank you all for your introductions. I don't know how much I can add to the beach showdown dynamic. I live in Boston and it's very rainy and gloomy and cold right now, so I might have lost that battle already. Yeah, and just one note as well, George. I just wanted to say a big congratulations for you winning the State Scoop IT Local Leader of the Year. So just wanted the audience to know that, and thank you so much once again. And also for the audience, please do use the emoji function as we run through the panel discussion. I'm really loving all the little pop-ups that I'm getting and the panelists are getting too. Okay, so getting into the questions. So I'd love for everyone to answer, what does sustainability mean in the context of your work? And what are some crucial aspects of sustainability that you sought to ensure in your own projects? Anyone could go first. Maybe let's start with you, George.
Cool. So I think for me, centering on what sustainability means for us and some examples on sustainability, mainly and most importantly, it's sort of hard to narrow down a specific sustainable project because for us, we have to think about sustainability all the time. I'll use, I'll use our recent TOPC project as sort of a guiding example to walk us through what sustainability means. But first and foremost, it's being centered as much as possible to the resident. I think the idea that a sustainable solution is a solution that comprehensively understands the challenge that it is trying to solve, and in doing so meets or exceeds the need that the resident has in that problem statement. So for us, in working with our Community Action Human Services Department around the Low Income Energy Assistance Program, or LIHEAP, we have to analyze that full stack and that full experience, the full journey, and think about how a tool addresses even a little bit of that journey. And if it does it really well, or if it does it, well enough, right, that is a step towards sustainability. So for us, it's very much an incremental approach. How close can we get to the thing, right? We call it the thing all the time. How can the thing be so good or be as good, and then we sort of build upon the goodness to sustain that. Another step in that journey, right, is actually a communication step. We love the power of a cross-functional team, but we also recognize that cross-functional teams sometimes cannot take a product to sustainability through to be a sustainable product. So it's starting early with, okay, here's the problem that we're trying to solve. Here's the thing that we're trying to do. And ultimately, here's how it will continue to be supported in our organization, right? So we're identifying the right teams that it goes to, the right tech stacks that it needs to be in order for that to be sustainable. So, now that we're concluding our LIHEAP journey, right, it's talking to our security teams. Okay, how can we bring this over the right way? Talking to the team that serves that department. How can you all maintain that? And then lastly, and most importantly, it is very much going back to identifying the bits and pieces in the organization that fit in at the right place at the right time. I have to shout out our user experience team in our communications customer experience department, because they're the ones that are sort of the guiding light on helping us understand that customer and understand sort of the things that get us to that foundational sustainability, right? They keep us aligned to the people part of the problem, because we are technologists and sometimes we like to throw a lot of technology at something. So yeah, in a nutshell, sustainability is a deep customer understanding. It's talking to people internally and externally, and then it's making sure that the right pieces are in the right place at the right time to grow the solution into something more, into walking down that roadmap. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, thanks, George. So maybe someone from Honolulu to also respond to that.
Thank you, Tom. Right. So, we were not, as a city, involved in the TOPC project, but we did work with CPI through this Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative. It's, from what I can tell, reading about TOPC, it's a very similar makeup. We identified a problem that our county faces, and we tried to find ways to resolve it. And rather than focusing on a single problem within a city department, we kind of took a bird's eye view of the issues that were common across our entire city and county. And we had a core team. This project was started up a couple of years back, and we had a core team of city employees from 7 different departments, including HR, IT, and even from our Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resilience. We actually have a charter created office dedicated to climate change and sustainability. And rather, like I indicated, rather than focus on one problem, we thought if there's one issue that we can tackle that'll have an outsized impact on our entire city workforce and our community, it was the problem of our workforce. Basically, we're having problems retaining and hiring, attracting people to our city workforce of about 10 to 12,000 employees. Without a robust city workforce, everything else, we can't deliver on the essential public services that are needed for both our residents and our visitors. So really, we had to look at the needs of our residents. It's a high cost of living here in Hawaii. There's a lot of personal struggle. And if our departments that service our, community are not staffed up properly and fully, the entire community will suffer. So what the project that we tackled, and in terms of what we see as sustainability, was being able to maintain a robust city workforce in this challenging post-pandemic job market. I mean, with the cost of living in Hawaii being so high, we actually see a regular outflow of residents, out migration to places like Las Vegas. I mean, everybody in Hawaii knows somebody who moved to Las Vegas because it's a cheaper cost of living. So while we're trying to rebuild our city workforce to make up for people who are leaving because of our demographics, we're facing that challenge. And Jennifer's team really is the front and center in terms of carrying out the ability to recruit, hire, and retain our employees. So that's what we're looking at in terms of sustainability, being able to deliver based on having a robust city workforce.
If I can just quickly add on to what Bugs said. So like he said, the project took a bird's eye view. Me being more of a middle manager, I was a more focused view. I supervise the staff who are actually doing the hiring. But then on a more personal level, I'm closer to this staff where we now have a flood of new hires. And so I was sort of in the weeds managing the reaction to that flood of new hires and how the employees, the existing staff, sort of shift and react to that new culture shift. So it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, and then I'm curious to hear, like, with that particular project, how you kind of embedded sustainability there, and what kind of uses of sustainability throughout that project. Yeah, like give us a little bit more specific detail about like that specific uses of sustainability in that project. Would love to hear a little bit more about that.
So Tammy, basically we had we thought, what better way to find out why people are not joining the city as employees or are interested in our positions by actually engaging people out in the community. Again, this was resident design, engaging key stakeholders. We actually engaged over 100 different community members. We want to get their feelings about the services that the city provides, how they feel about going to the DMV, how they feel about getting a building permit. We had a notorious backlog of building permits applications, which has been whittled down quite a bit through the work of our planning and permitting department. But a key aspect of our project was making sure we engage the stakeholders. We're not going to just assume being, with the HR people that we know the answer to everything. We don't. And so the key part of that project was engaging the people. I mean, we engaged 100 different community members. We came up with, I think it was 70 different ideas related specifically to hiring and retaining employees. And we were able to group them into 8 different buckets. And some of the stuff was quite, stuff we'd never think about. Why don't you engage more high school students? Because not everybody's going to go to college. I mean, everybody assumes, or the assumption is a lot of people want to go to college. That's not necessarily the case. Right now, we're also looking at, do we really need to have degree requirements when people have the skills that you're looking for? Is that a barrier to hiring? What we really wanted to focus on, and Jen folks are also looking at, is things we can do to change how we've done things in the past while still complying with the law and making it sustainable so that it's not one and done. We're looking far into the future. If our demographics don't change, we're going to continue to lose people. What can we do to keep them interested in city government?
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for that response. It's really great to hear that in both of your responses, both Honolulu and George from Miami, you're talking about how do we approach sustainability with residents in mind, and how that is a core and crux to like building for sustainability. And I really like that kind of holistic process that you guys are talking about in your responses. So thank you for sharing that. A core part of sustainability, and particularly when we're thinking about long term, is the trade-off we also often have to make in regards to the short-term outcomes. So balancing long-term sustainability with short-term outcomes. And I'd love these next few questions will be kind of talking about that particular challenge. So George, I'd love to know, like, how do you make the case for investing in long-term sustainabilities to stakeholders who might be focused on primarily short-term outcomes?
Yeah, that's really an awesome question that I think a lot of teams passively have to consider. I think balancing sort of the short-term returns with long-term sustainability involves like a little bit of like an artful dance when you're presenting challenges to your teams, right? Um, I think a challenge that we have again, and it comes right back to communication. I like to call it vibes management, right? You're really at the end of the day, like a lot of product management or a lot of getting a big project across the finish line is just simply managing the vibes. So in managing the vibes, there has to be an idea of like, okay, like near term, here are our milestones. Here's where we need to be. And conversely, here are like our points where if this thing doesn't work, if the thing doesn't work, then like we need to hit the eject button. Like, let's get out of here. Let's not waste a second more of our time. Let's pivot. Let's find the new solution, right? But conversely, in communicating those short-term milestones, we need to tell the long-term story. There's a practice that Amazon employs that I've always really liked, where when they're about to start a big project, the first thing they do is they write a press release of what the world looks like when that product has been introduced. And it's a really cool exercise because, and we've had a few instances where Amazon sort of has done that exercise with us where we start where, okay, like once we launch this thing, what does that mean for our residents? What does that mean for our employees? And then we work backwards, right? That working backwards process. We work backwards from that vision. So we focus people who are very narrowly lined in on the short term and saying, hey, short term is 100% important because those are the things that are going to validate us as we move along. But here's the vision that we're moving. And maybe those short term milestones might not all be hit, or they're going to be hit in different ways, but the vision's not going to stay the same. The vision will stay the same. The vision is here's what we're ultimately trying to solve. The problem statement informs that vision. The mission and vision statements of our organization inform that vision. And at the end of the day, the goal is we are relentlessly pursuing a solution to a challenge in our community. So that's how I would focus it. And it's, for our teams, it's worked really well because it gives us the opportunity to manage the vibes. It gives everybody the opportunity to say, okay, at every point we have an opportunity where we can course correct or we can affirm what we know. But at the same time, here's the long-term vision that hasn't changed. We still need to move forward to that. If at one point the app doesn't work, we're not going to just like leave it alone and run away. We're going to work through it. We're going to pivot. We're going to find something else in service of that long-term vision.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I really like that sort of vibes management anecdote that you gave. I think, yeah, you're right. It's really important to think in the functions of iteration and making sure that you're checking where you're at every time with the long-term vision being sustained throughout and reminding each other of the long-term vision and aims is crucial. So I appreciate that insight. So I think Bugs, you alluded to this earlier as well when you talked about the stakeholders that you had involved in your project. And I want to delve into this a little bit more. So I'd love to hear what role residents played in evolving and maintaining sustainability in your product, in your project, sorry.
Well, I think one of the first things we get from residents when we started engaging in them was, what does it take so long to hire people at the city? I submit an application, I never hear back from you folks. And we were lucky. We had a Bloomberg Harvard fellow from actually come in and study our hiring and onboarding processes. And he did this deep dive into our budget department, our HR department at the individual agencies. And he came up with a report in it, but he basically concluded we take 6 months from the time we try to fill a position until we actually onboard somebody. To the mayor, that was completely unacceptable. Why does it take 6 months? And everybody had their explanation. Well, the agencies who want to hire take too long to submit a request to fill. And then, well, budget takes too long to approve a request because they need to make sure there's funds available. And then HR takes too long to get a posting out and to send eligible lists to the departments. It's a lot of that. And so when we started looking at what changes we could possibly make, then we had to deal with our internal stakeholders. And this is where that vibes management comes in that Jorge was talking about. And Jennifer was really smiling because she deals with the vibes at her level a lot more than I do. But basically, we took those that objective data, said it takes 6 months. We took some incremental steps to change, some of our processes and whatnot, just for the short term. And really, within a year, we're able to reduce it down to 3. And we're probably less than 3 months now. And it's even then, it's still, it takes longer than it should, in my personal opinion. But Jennifer guys are really working on that. But some of the easy things we had to do just for the short term involve really getting the stakeholders in our department, at least in those processes that we could control, getting them to get beyond the but. Basically, we'd say, we're going to do this, and they come back with but there's a civil service rule, but there's a process, there's this, there's that. I mean, so in the short term, we made some changes. In the long term, we're actually making changes to the rules themselves, because that's within our control. Why not change the rules if it's not working? What we had to show for the long term was that, guys, this is not going to work if we continue to do things the way we are, because we're netting less employees every year with retirements, with resignations and whatnot. So really, part of it was taking the data, taking the ideas from the public that we engaged, and saying, hey, guys, we can do this. It's wanted by people. We can do it. A lot of it was just getting beyond this mindset in the past that you're going to violate some rule and you'll be subject to challenge. I mean, I'm a former attorney, as is Jennifer. Sometimes it's good to actually have stuff litigated because there's some resolution to an issue that, maybe you weren't fear. I mean, maybe the fear was misplaced. But the vibes management, and Jennifer can speak to this a lot more. I hear some of it when the staff comes to me, but Jennifer is really, like she said, she's at the front and center dealing with the staff who has to implement these changes. And she's making a lot of progress, but it's still been a challenge for her. And, I think that would be I think it'd be good for everyone to hear from Jennifer on that.
Yeah, thanks, Bugs. Yeah, I'd love to hear from you, Jennifer. Just some examples of the kind of reactions that you had from staff, or the vibes, as it seems to be the theme that we're talking about.
Yeah, I love this phrase. So an example of vibes management that I've recently encountered. I mean, I've talked about how we're just having a huge influx of new hires, and part of that means we have to build new workstations, but it's not like we suddenly have more space in our building. It means that we're asking employees to rearrange their existing workspace to accommodate additional workstations. You can imagine there was some pushback from our existing employees when they hear they're going to have to move their desk over, and now they get a smaller space so we can squeeze someone in next to them. And one of my supervisors kept asking me, who's going to sit here? Who's going to sit next to me? What's going to happen? I finally realized, okay, I can manage this vibe, and said, hey, it's actually your decision. You're one of the supervisors of this whole area. Why don't you decide who's going to sit in this new workstation next to you? It can be our brand new hire, or it can be one of your existing staff. And it completely changed the tone of our interactions going forward once I gave her just that little bit of control. So that's one example of vibes management I've encountered.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I think it's really important, what you mentioned in your story. I think that kind of like adaptability and communicating that adaptability, and that being really a core part of sustainability and in that process too. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so I think as part of this conversation, we're not only talking about processes and tools and resources that we use to instill sustainability in our work, but we also want to talk about the cultural practices that help us kind of embed sustainability in our projects and processes and policies. So I'd love for each team to maybe share an example of like how you communicated to your colleagues in terms of what they needed to do to ensure sustainability, and how you managed to make that less of a checkbox task, but more of a specific, like this is a cultural thing that we're doing here. And maybe George, you can start with that response.
Yeah, sure. I think for us and for Miami-Dade County, the conversation of sustainability is sometimes bidirectional, and sometimes it actually starts with other people telling us, right? So as an innovation team, right, the challenge is that we are constantly pipelining new things. And one of the components that, I actually love about our team and love about our department is that at every step we're wondering, someone always asks, well, how do we sustain this? Right. And for me, that's not, at least, only speaking for me, right? We're veering into George's opinion, but for me, that is not a negative thing. I don't run away from that answer. I like to run towards that answer, because what we're all agreeing to is that, hey, this thing that we're working on, we're gonna provide it to people. The goal is that it's going to help an employee, a team, a resident, right? There's a customer at the end of this journey, at the end of this tool, technology, service, whatever. And we're making a commitment that we're going to launch this thing and it's going to work, and that it's going to be there. So we're thinking about that at every step. And for me, thinking about it from a communication perspective, and it's actually why I love that we have HR folks here on this panel as well, is that I think IT is going through a very similar transformation that HR has gone through, from this, function of an organization to a strategic partner that says, okay, if you want to be here, if Miami-Dade County wants to achieve these things, these are the people and the decisions that we need to make along the way, right? IT is very much rapidly going through that process where we're saying, okay, our function as a technology provider is now growing to be more of a solutions provider. And sometimes that technology might not be the best solution. It might not be a technology solution. So how can we just help you? How can we assist? So a lot of that becomes less communicating and more listening, and just listening to our departments, listening to our own teams, right? We're an IT organization of a little under 900 people. So, we have big teams that serve our other larger departments and serve massive functions in our county organization that's a little over 30,000. So, us, it's as much listening as it is communicating. And a lot of that listening is, okay, we're going to do this thing. It's really cool. We're going to help a lot of people with it. How do we make sure that it's going to keep helping a lot of people and it doesn't go away? Because for me as a public servant, everything that we do is a commitment to the resident. Everything that we put out there is a commitment to the resident. If it's, for example, a beta project, right? What we're committing to is, hey, we hear you. We're moving towards solving this problem, and this is a step along the journey. If it's a production application or if it's a service that we're providing, then we know that people are going to depend on that service. How can we grow that service, right? The sustainability is as much, at least in our case, technology and people. It's also marketing and demand and telling the story, right? We want to grow. We want to grow that function. Anecdote, like a good story from our end is, our innovation team is very unique in the types of positions that are in it. We have our department's communications function is on our team, is part of the innovation team, because the act of communicating and telling the story of technology is a innovative function within a technology organization. We can't expect folks to adopt a solution if we are not telling the story of that adoption, if we're not communicating the value and communicating the abilities that we have to our internal customers, or communicating the impact that a tool has on the residents. So for just to kind of sum it up, it's being a good listener, listening to our teams, it's telling a good story about that product so that people adopt it, so they drive towards adoption. And it's really just understanding that we are at a point in our journey as a function of a government agency that we have to say to ourselves, okay, we're going to reset your password, and 100% we're gonna totally fix your computer, but we're also here to help you fix a solution. We're here to help you fix a problem, and if that problem is a new app or a new service, great. If it's that we just help you re-engineer your process, awesome.
Yeah, I really appreciate that response. I think about like how, sustainability is not just a functional process, but a narrative process too. Like you were saying, like it's about listening and it's also about communicating that idea too. And I really like even in what you're saying about IT as a role, like sustaining that role means to like think about how we're trying to address the challenges and how that department operates within those challenges. It's not just about resetting passwords, it's about thinking about how do we ensure that we're solving problems by coming up with systemic solutions.
The market is changing the expectations of residents. Like the day that you could get a roll of toilet paper delivered to your house within a day changed the expectation of everyone. So now people want to be able to submit a permit, get a permit within a shorter amount of time. They want everything, they want as much self-service as possible. And how do we enable that? We enable that with teams that are focused on a customer experience. We enable that with a technology team that's aligned to that. And most of all, when all the teams are aligned to that vision of sustainability, the vision that hey, we're producing a thing and it is a commitment that we're making to solve a challenge in our community, that is when sort of the magic happens, right? That's when we know for sure, okay, like we're going to get to that endpoint.
Yeah, I appreciate that anecdote. I think that really like hits home as to like the changing dynamics of how we operate with our residents. Same question goes for you guys at Honolulu. Just how do you ensure that you're instilling a culture of sustainability rather than it being just a tick in a checklist?
So, Jorge, you're absolutely right. I agree with your point that IT and HR are both undergoing a transformation, and we are moving towards being more of a strategic partner with our individual departments. Really, in the past, HR was, hey, departments, you tell us which positions you want to fill, and we'll go fill it for you. Our current director is very innovative. She's very hands-on. She gets into the weeds, and we actually are taking a more proactive approach. Hey, departments, what's your problem? You need to fill positions. Okay, you know what? We're going to come in and we're going to literally work with you and your team, and we're going to help you fill your positions. We're going to identify the issues tailored to your particular department, and we're going to help you identify the positions that you need to fill. We're going to be a strategic partner. And we actually issued a directive from the mayor. I saw it on the chat from Amanda that, you need a lot of political will to do things. And the mayor is behind this because he's from the private sector. He understands recruitment is a 24/7, project to, as he calls it, feed the beast of 10,000 employees. You need to keep replenishing your employees as they leave. And he issued a mayor's directive that was actually written by HR, which basically said, we're going to come in, we're going to help you departments, and you're going to cooperate with us. It didn't go over well initially with a lot of the administrative staff at the individual departments. I mean, we were flooded with emails. Jennifer was getting a lot of complaints. We were getting complaints. And we actually had to sit down with the individual department, we call them administrative services officers, to basically tell them, look, this is a change, but we're here to help. We're going to be a partner with you guys. We're not looking to take over. We're not looking to point fingers. And, this is the only way we believe we can sustain the hiring and the filling and the recruitment of positions going far into the future, even beyond this current mayor's term. We need to be a little more proactive. But, to manage the vibes again, we had to make sure they understood we're here to help. And Jennifer even had to deal with vibes even within our own department. So, yeah, I mean, I love that. I mean, Jorge, you bring it all together.
The vibes are everywhere. Like it is just 360 degrees of vibe.
360 vibes. Yeah, for sure. I appreciate that response, Bugs. Just a couple of things that I heard from that. Like one is like gaining investment from leadership is quite important too, in terms of like embedding and instilling like long-term processes and instilling that idea or sustaining that idea. And also just that idea of like, I don't know if it's hand holding, but like being able to like ensure and like communicate with like whoever's experiencing that challenge that you're there with them is really important. Yeah. Jennifer, do you have anything to add to that response from Bugs?
Just reiterating sort of the same thing. It's really intimidating when you task, a city with just hire as many people as you can. And so kind of what we've been trying to do is communicate more frequently and break the project down into smaller parts by giving smaller goals, like identify your top 20 priority hires, and then we're going to come in and help you with those priorities is our latest sort of communication effort. So that's been really helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much for your response. I just a quick side note. I've noticed that there's no questions from the audience as of yet. So if the audience has any questions, please make sure you put them either in the chat or the Q&A function. But I think for now I've got a bunch more questions, and I think this is really insightful. So I'd love to continue asking those questions, and maybe for the next 5 minutes, I've got a couple of questions for you guys, and then we can hand it over to the audience if they even want to unmute and ask the questions personally. That's also possible. I do want to talk a little bit about like maybe like putting these kind of like intangible ideas and concepts into practical steps. So I'd love to hear from each of you guys, or one or two of you guys, just like what kind of practical steps can leaders take to instill a mindset focused on sustainable design amongst their teams? And George, you alluded to that, and so did you, Bugs. But I'd love to like hear those like being a bit parsed out and a bit specific. And do try to draw from examples too. That would be really helpful. Yeah, anyone can go ahead.
Something that I've personally done is I've started having meetings almost every Monday morning with my staff to kind of just remind them of the goals that we're trying to achieve, and the context for these series of meetings is that we've hired a lot of new staff. We're going to start from the basics, and they're sort of a teaching session. We call them knowledge sharing Monday mornings. But it's also an opportunity for me to frame some of the recent changes we've made in terms of the basics and reminding people of why we're making these changes. It's hard to say at this point whether it's working, but I do feel like at least it gets the message across more frequently.
So we actually have something similar. I love that. It's again, we're validating sort of the things we do with our peers. So every Monday we have a meeting called How We Win the Week. And then that meeting, we all, our team gets together. We budget 15 minutes for unstructured playtime where we can talk about whatever we want to talk about. And then we just jump in and talk about the five, no more. So we say no more than five, but there are a few members on the team that will pile on 6 or 7. But well, about the 5 things that we want to do to win the week. And then on Friday, we check in with each other to see if we have in fact won the week. So I love that we could validate that Monday morning sort of level set is always really helpful. I saw somebody in chat, I'm going to shout out my fellow George, talk about, low budget municipalities, and is that another view from low budget municipalities is to carefully pick technological solutions that can be maintained in time with local resources. I'll let you in on a little secret. I don't like to tell this to everybody. I actually love being budget constrained, especially at the beginning, because it helps us push for as much of a best effort as we can. So myself and our enterprise architect who we work together on the R&D side, we really try to stay away from procuring new things or spinning up any resources. We want to try to get as far as we can with the problem statement that we have and the resources that we have. That is a big component in sort of our push for sustainability, because if we can validate the solution without without even a sort of medium-sized resource investment, we can say, look, we think that we can solve X problem with Y solution, and we can do it with just like some time and a few people getting together on a Wednesday afternoon and doing a 2-hour work session. Then that sort of builds the case for the next step. We've approached our AI practice in a very similar way. We are a Microsoft shop. We're an organization that relies on Microsoft, and a lot of the tools that we've used to spin up some AI chatbots are baked into our data team's practice. So it's a matter of taking the use case to our data team and saying, okay, let's validate this, and in 2 weeks we're gonna get to a solution. A great example of that is we have a right now that is about to enter into beta a chat tool for our animal services department that we call Perfect Match. It is a tool that helps folks find pets based on sort of their needs for a pet. So, for example, if I'm looking for a pet, I want a small brown lazy dog that's good with children. We asked Perfect Match, and it returns 5 examples of a pet that meets that criteria. That was very much we need to validate this in 2-week solution. Our enterprise architect Syed was about to go on vacation. He's like, dude, I don't think this is going to work. But good luck. Let me know how it goes. This is what we need to do. I'm like, all right, perfect. And then he got back on Monday, and I said, he's like, oh, did it work? And I said, alarmingly well. We're going to need to figure this out. So that is, I think, a great way to do that. And we did that with sort of our existing Azure, OpenAI Studio resources. We did that with a few team members in a work session in the afternoon. We brought together our amazing resources from our middleware and integrations team, some resources from the data team, some resources from our Miami-Dade.gov team. And we said, okay, this thing's going to work or it doesn't. Let's figure it out. And we did that. And then that sort of built the case for, okay, here's a successful use case. Let's talk about what our long-term investments will be. So that sort of short-term versus long-term approach.
So, Tommy, I think I wanted to add, part of the sell when we make changes to the staff is I like to remind staff, go back and look at your emails from 6 months ago when you were raising all these issues about a particular change we're going to make. 6 months later, did they really come to pass? I mean, when we started making all these changes, I was talking with Jennifer about it the other week. There was concerns about staff being unhappy because it's such a big change. We're doing things in violation of our rules and all of that. And I pointed out to Jennifer, nobody left. 2.5 years into the project, everybody's still here. The only people who left were those who retired. And so, it just goes back to, the fear of the unknown a lot of times will just paralyze you from making changes. But if you're willing to just try and prototype a project or try to prototype an idea, if it fails, like Jorge said, you hit the ejection button. So what? But you have to be willing to take that first step. And if it turns out it succeeds, great. If it doesn't, you move on. But nobody can come back and say you guys never tried it. And you really, in my experience, a lot of times the biggest things that you fear will never happen. It never happens. And so I like to remind staff, go back and check your emails from 6 months ago.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I see a lot of through lines in all of your responses. I think there's one thing about regularly approaching and creating structures to check in with each other, like those Monday meetings. There's also this kind of thing that you noted of George and Bugs of how do you work with constraints and how do you show give a bit of a litmus test of well, under these constraints this has worked. So surely this can happen, and using that as an example going forward. And also Bugs, I really appreciate that piece that you mentioned around essentially creating reflection processes instilled in your like long-term project plan? I think like you said it in a very anecdotal way, but definitely like including points where like people can look back and see like, oh, like this is how much progress we've made as a result. And that could look like checking an email that you sent 6 months ago, or it could look like a focus group meeting in 12 months time since you've created the project. We have about 7 minutes left. Just before I ask like a final question to the panelists, I want to see if there's any questions. I also noticed that I thought I was in just a regular Zoom call, so nobody can actually unmute. This is this is a webinar, but if you have a question, please do share in the Q&A. Otherwise, I will move on to the final question. Okay, brilliant. I can move us on to the last question, and it's a very simple question, just like, what is one final word of advice or anecdote that you might want to give someone who is just at the beginning of their plans for sustainability?
Khalid, if I may, I think just uh, be willing to just prototype an idea and just take it as far as you can. Don't be paralyzed into thinking you need to address every contingency from the very beginning. I mean, if there's issues with an idea, it'll crop up soon enough. But the fact that you can start it, I mean, we learned through that initiative with Bloomberg and with CPI was be willing to prototype something. You're not going to get it right the first time necessarily, but if you have something to work with as a prototype, you can refine it and you can move forward.
I guess to add on to what Bugs said, it really helped for us to kind of pace ourselves because there were so many things that we wanted to do right away. And so, we started with sort of our own internal processes that we could control. Then we moved on to our internal rules that we controlled. And then we moved on to internal stakeholders that we could form connections with. But we're also now branching out into those who are outside of our own organization and partnering with them to come to like new agreements about salaries and things like that. But it's been an incremental process where we just keep getting bigger and doing more as we get to that step.
Yeah, and I think for me, building on those two amazing points is the idea that there is risk in not doing something. We always worry about the risk in well, what if we do this thing and it breaks, or what if we do this thing and it doesn't work? There's also risk in not changing it and not doing things. And I think that one of the best ways to de-risk something scary and new is to innovate with friends. So, connect with folks in your community, connect with residents to understand their needs, but also build cross-functional teams within your organization and even across departments, right? Our mantra on the innovation team is to build relationships with our departments so that when a challenge arises, we can put together the right Avengers team to solve that challenge, right? So, we want our security teams at the table. And if we bring them in early, that means later on when the solution works, the security team doesn't get a mysterious ticket in their inbox wondering what this is, right? Bring your user experience team as early as possible because they're the ones closest to the customer. They're the ones thinking about the customer all the time. And we don't have to replicate functions. We can bring folks together from cross departments. We can build a team that's specifically suited for that challenge. And you know what? And I'll even add on to that. Make sure that your HR and procurement teams are at the table, right? Because as part of that sustainability, we're going to need people to sustain those tools, right? What does hiring look like for AI in the next 10 years? What do we want to hire for? What do those positions look like? When we procure our systems, we want our procurement teams thinking about, okay, we might not need to procure just software. We might need to procure code. We might need to procure things that we haven't procured before. How can we start working through that? So make sure that your team is as cross-functional as possible. It makes things less scary. It makes taking leaps a lot easier, and it gets you it's one step closer in that incremental journey from taking it one short-term milestone at a time towards that longer-term vision.
Amazing. Thank you all for sharing those final anecdotes. I think those are amazing pieces of use cases for everyone to use. And I appreciate you guys for participating over the last hours and dedicating your time to share your stories and experiences and expertise with the audience today. And also just bringing the vibes, to use the term of today. As shared in the chat, if you want to reach out to any of our panelists, we've shared their details on the chat. We've also, if you want to learn more about TOPC and CPI, you can sign up to our newsletter or reach out to some of the contacts that we've mentioned below in the chat. Once again, thank you to all the panelists who've joined. Really appreciate the audience for tuning in too and engaging, and also hopefully you learn and taken some stuff away in terms of sustainability. Just as we are entering the last minute, there is a poll that we'd love for you to just quickly share your feedback in terms of how today went for you all. Would really love for you to do so. But yeah, again, thank you so much to the panelists and appreciate all your advice. And thank you all for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.